Jean-Michel Basquiat was born in Brooklyn in 1960. His mother, Matilde Andradas, was also born in Brooklyn, but to parents of Puerto Rican origin. His father, Gerard Basquiat, was an immigrant from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. As a result of this mixed heritage, young Jean-Michel was fluent in both French, Spanish, and English. His early readings of the French symbolist poetry in the original language would later be an influence on his artwork he made as an adult. Basquiat displayed a talent for art in his early childhood, learning to draw and paint with his mother's encouragement, often using supplies such as paper brought home from his father's job as an accountant. Together, Basquiat and his mother would attend museum exhibitions in New York, and by the age of 6, Jean-Michel was enrolled as a junior member of the Brooklyn Museum. He was also a keen athlete, competing in track events at his school. After being hit by a car whilst playing in the street at age 8, Basquiat underwent surgery for the removal of his spleen. This event led to him reading Gray's Anatomy, which was given to him by his mother while he recovered. The biomechanical images of this text, along with comic book art and cartoons that the young Basquiat enjoyed, would one day come to inform graffiti-inscribed canvases he became known for. After his parents' divorce, Basquiat lived alone with his father because his mother was determined unfit to take care of him due to mental health problems. Citing physical and emotional abuse, Basquiat eventually ran away from home and was adopted by a friend's family. Basquiat's art was fundamentally rooted in New York's graffiti scene in the 1970s. After becoming involved in the Upper West Side drama group called Family Life Theater, he developed the character Samo, an acronym for Same Old Shit, a man who tried to sell a fake religion to audiences. In 1976, he had a friend named Al Diaz, and he started spray painting buildings in Lower Manhattan under the nom de plume. The Samo pieces were largely text-based and communicated as anti-establishment, anti-religion, and anti-political messages. The texts of these messages were accompanied by logos and imagery that would later on feature in Basquiat's solo work, particularly the three-pointed crown. The Samo pieces soon received media attention from the counterculture press, most notably The Village Voice, a publication that documented art, culture, music, and that saw itself as distinct from the mainstream. When Basquiat and Diaz had a disagreement, they decided to stop working together. Basquiat ended the project with a terse message: Samo is dead. This message appeared on the facade of several Soho art galleries in downtown buildings during the 1980s. After taking note of the declaration, street artist, contemporary, and friend of Basquiat, Keith Haring, staged a mock wake for Samo at Club 57, an underground nightclub in the East Village. During this period, Basquiat would frequently be homeless and forced to sleep at friends' apartments or on park benches, supporting himself by panhandling, dealing drugs, and peddling hand-painted postcards and t-shirts. He frequented downtown clubs, however, particularly the Mud Club and Club 57, where he was known as part of the group Baby Crowd of younger attendees. Both clubs were popular hangouts for a new generation of visual artists and musicians, including Keith Haring, Kenny Scharf, movie director Jim Jarmusch, and Ann Magnuson, all of whom became friends and occasional collaborators with Basquiat. Haring in particular was a notable rival as well as a friend. The two are often remembered as competing against each other and to improve the scope, scale, and ambition of their work. The two both gained recognition at similar points in their career and progressed in parallel to reach the heights of art world stardom. Due in part to his immersion in the downtown scene, Basquiat began to gain more opportunities to show his art and became a key figure in the new downtown artistic movement. He, for example, appeared as a nightclub DJ in Blondie's music video, Rapture, cementing his cachet as a figure within the new wave of cool music, art, and film emerging from the Lower East Side. During this time, he also formed and performed with his band Gray. Basquiat was critical of the lack of people of color in the downtown scene. However, in the late 1970s, he also began spending time uptown with his graffiti artists in the Bronx and Harlem. After his work was included in the historic Times Square show of June 1980, Basquiat's profile rose higher, and he had his first solo exhibition in 1982. René Ricard's Art Forum article, The Radiant Child, of December 1981, solidified Basquiat's position as a rising star in the art world, as well as the conjunction between the uptown graffiti and downtown punk scenes his work represented. Basquiat's rise to wider recognition coincided with the arrival in New York of German neo-expressionism, which provided a congenial forum for his own street-smart, curbside expressionism. Basquiat began exhibiting regularly alongside artists like Julian Schnabel and David Sal, all of whom were reacting to one degree or another against the recent art historical dominance of conceptualism and minimalism. Neo-expressionism marked the return of painting and the re-emergence of human figures in contemporary art making. Images of the African diaspora and classic Americana punctuated Basquiat's work at this time, some of which was featured at the prestigious Mary Boone Gallery in solo shows in the mid-1980s. Basquiat was later represented by art dealer and galleryist Larry Gagosian in Los Angeles. In 1982 was a significant year for Basquiat. He opened 6 solo shows in cities across the world and became the youngest artist ever to be included in Documenta, the prestigious international contemporary art extravaganza held every 5 years in Kassel, Germany. During this time, Basquiat created some 200 artworks, developed a signature motif, a heroic crowned black oracle figure, the legendary jazz musician Dizzy Gillespie, and boxer Sugar Ray Robinson and Muhammad Ali were among Basquiat's inspiration for his work during this period. Sketchy and often abstract, the portraits captured the essence and rather than physical likeness of their subjects. The ferocity of Basquiat's technique with slashes of paint and dynamic dashes of line was intended to reveal what he saw as his subject's inner self, their hidden feelings, and their deepest desires. These works also reinforce the intellect and passion of their subjects rather than the fixated on the fetishized black male body. Another epic configuration based on West African griot also features heavily in this era of Basquiat's work. The griot propagated community history in West African culture through storytelling and song. He was typically depicted by Basquiat with a grimace and squinting elliptical eyes fixed securely on the observer. Basquiat's artistic strategies and personal ascendancies was in keeping with a wider Black Renaissance in the New York art world. By the early 1980s, Basquiat had befriended pop artist Andy Warhol, with whom he collaborated on a series of works from 1984 to 1986, such as 10 Punching Bags. Warhol would often paint first, then Basquiat would layer over his work. In 1985, a New York Times magazine featuring article declared Basquiat the hot young American artist of the 1980s. His relationship became the subject of friction between Basquiat and many of his downtown contemporaries, as it appeared to mark a new interest in the commercial dimension of the art market. Warhol was also criticized for the potential exploitation of a young and fashionable artist of color to boost his own credentials as a current and relevant to the newly significant East Village scene. Broadly speaking, these collaborations were not well received by either audiences or critics, and are often now viewed as lesser works of both artists. Perhaps as a result of the newfound fame and commercial pressure put upon his work, Basquiat was by this point in his life becoming increasingly addicted to both heroin and cocaine. Several friends linked this dependency to the stress maintaining his career and the pressures of being a person of color in a predominantly white art world. Basquiat died of heroin overdose in his apartment in 1988 at the age of 27. In his short life, Jean-Michel Basquiat nonetheless came to play an important and historic role in the rise of the downtown cultural scene in New York and neo-expressionism more broadly. While the larger public latched to the superficial exotism of his work and were captivated by his overnight celebrity, his art, which has often been described inaccurately as naive and ethnically gritty, held important connections to expressive precursors such as Jean Dubuffet and Cy Twombly. A product of the celebrity and commerce-obsessed culture of the 1980s, Basquiat and his work continue to serve for many observers as a metaphor for the dangers of artistic and social excess. Like the comic book superheroes that formed an early influence, Basquiat rocketed to fame and riches, and then fell back to earth, the victim of drug abuse and eventual overdose. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, and comment on who you want to see next. Peace.